again to the fine folks of the liveactionanime.org forums. I am Thrashed Till Death, and you've probably noticed by now that this piece of amateurish Windows Movie Maker abuse is a deviation from my normal format. This is partly because I find ad-libbing to be torture, and when you're watching an anime review, you probably don't want to look at my unwashed, unshaven mug anyway. So have a picture of this guy instead. This is Tomoru, the protagonist of the 1991 OVA, Detonator Orgun, directed by Masami Obari, a title more or less lost in the annals of anime history, and not altogether unjustifiably, but I'll get into that in a minute. Set in the usual ubiquitous futuristic metropolis of the usual ubiquitous futuristic year, Tomoru Shindo is a university student who feels alienated from what he perceives as a soulless and clinical society, finding recluse in video games and historical warfare. Conveniently enough for him, then, there's an alien invasion on the way from the warlike mechanical eviluders, and even more conveniently, a rogue eviluder named Orgun willing to merge with Tomoru in order to repel the invasion before Earth is destroyed. It's easy to see why Detonator Orgun's been forgotten. To listen to that synopsis, you'd imagine just another banal reworking of the age-old boy finds robot saves world scenario, and, well, you'd be right. However, that description doesn't really give you a full idea of what to expect from Detonator Orgun, as it does do a couple of things to make itself stand out. First and foremost of these is the magnitude of the stupidity on display. The version of the OVA I own only has the English dub on it, and characteristically of a manga dub from 1991, the voice actors plainly don't give a shit, so I'm willing to admit that my experience of the hilariously execrable dialogue may have been partly due to this. Of course, this doesn't excuse some of the most death-defying leaps of logic I've ever witnessed in a work of fiction, with the characters pulling deus ex machina and irrational yet seemingly correct deductions out of their collective asses at every turn. Detonator Orgun is not for you if you need your shows to make a lick of sense, even within their own twisted internal logic. No one in this show seems capable of sustaining rational thought. Characters relate to each other in the most unrealistic ways and are apparently developed according to the arbitrary whims of the writers. And come moralizing time, it can't even seem to figure out what it itself wants to say. And yet, in spite of the manner in which Detonator Orgun tries to undermine itself at every possible opportunity, I can't quite convince myself that it's a bad show. In spite of the asinine voice acting, in spite of the jaw-droppingly moronic plot twists, in spite of the horrific stillborn moments where it actually tries to convey a theme, and ends up coming across like Ed Wood trying to write 2001: A Space Odyssey, I found myself strangely compelled by the proceedings. The scale of the events going on screen may well have something to do with it. Clocking in at 2.5 hours of interstellar war, Orgun successfully delivers a series of grandiose set pieces that keep the pace up and the pulse quick, and during the finale with the Evoluder mothership approaching Earth, it genuinely does create tension and impress upon us the gravity of the impending catastrophe. While it's almost 20 years old, the animation is beginning to badly show its age, and yet the mecha battles still inspire the sense of savage balletic grace that mecha should inspire. In a strange way, Detonator Orgun proves itself greater than the sum of its parts, although each of its individual elements, plot, characterization, dialogue, world building, and so forth, are positively infantile in their execution. In a broader narrative context, they somehow mesh together quite comfortably, creating a sci-fi actioner that's tight and compelling to watch, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. It's hardly a masterpiece, and indeed what modest success it can claim is largely in spite of itself. Is that enough to elevate it to a modestly positive 2.5-star rating? Honestly, I'm not sure, but sometimes it's worth watching shows like Detonator Orgun to remember why we got into anime in the first place. Not for high art, but for trashy Saturday evening entertainment. At the end of the day, is that really such a bad thing?
I am master, soon you'll see your world. What you